it is almost inexplicable. The first thing we have to remember is that this is not a verdict. This hasn't gotten to verdict. This was an indictment. So the grand jury was asked to consider evidence in order to prefer charges so that the police officer could go to trial, but they didn't do that. What was so strange about it is I've never seen, in my years, I've never seen a prosecutor take such a hands-off approach. And to listen to that press conference, Amy, you would think that he had just sort of spread out the pieces of paper on the table and said, grand jury, do your thing. Let me tell you, prosecutors never do that. There's a reason why they say prosecutors can indict a ham sandwich. It's because they entirely control that process. Now, they did release some of the transcripts yesterday, and I took a look at some of them, and what I saw, which people need to know, is that this wasn't just the grand jurors listening to the testimony idly. The prosecutors are framing the evidence. And as you heard in that press conference yesterday, there was more talk about what Mike Brown did than there was about what Darren Wilson did. It was almost as if in that grand jury process looking to charge Darren Wilson, that they were really charging Mike Brown. And I also noticed in some of the transcripts that they were setting up, the prosecutors were setting up this sense of fear, even asking the police sergeant when he got to Mike Brown's body, when he first got there, leading them into the testimony to say, yeah, there were people that were agitated, there were people that were upset, there were people that were moving around, and of course people were agitated because Mike Brown's body was on the ground. But they're setting this up so that essentially to play into the defense of Darren Wilson, that he acted reasonably out of fear for his life, A. B, that he acted reasonably and pursuant to the law because he thought that Mike Brown was breaking the law. So what we have is a grand jury system that for most people in the world seems to play out like it was, gosh, what can we do? The evidence was really overwhelming. But I don't think the evidence was. You only have one side of that story. And unfortunately, in this process, Mike Brown's side of the story never gets told. And what we do know is that we know that the prosecutors were setting this up so that it was in the best light, in my view. It was, from what I've seen, in the best light for the police officer and his quote-unquote reasonable belief that his life was in danger. So that's why he shot. I don't think we can take away anything from this decision not to indict other than that it is now officially open season on black folks when it comes to police violence. You know, that feeling that most of us had yesterday when we were listening to the decision, that feeling in your stomach, that unsettling feeling like there's nothing we can do, that's what injustice feels like. And we have to remember that the folks on the ground feel that same way, but they felt this for a long time. This is not a media event. This is life for people in the black community in urban areas. This is life for people in Ferguson. And so, yes, people are upset. People are acting out. People are disrupting the status quo. People want to shut it down. And frankly, I think that they should. You know, we should be thinking about the folks in Ferguson as pro-democracy protesters. We should be thinking about them as anti-structural racism protesters. Because when you think about what they're challenging on that big a scale, we know that a grand jury decision one way or the other isn't going to solve the structural racism problem. What solves the structural racism problem is getting to people like Bob McCulloch so that he can't do the thing that he did in that press conference. If you noticed, he on the one hand said this was a justified shooting by the police officer, but then on the other hand said, oh, but we have to change the system. Now, those are completely inconsistent. It makes no sense. It makes no sense legally, and it certainly doesn't make any sense politically. And what we have here in with the protesters, and I'm happy that the Center for Constitutional Rights and Arch City Defenders locally on the ground, the National Lawyers Guild and Advancement Project have organized 300 lawyers to come down to be able to help represent the protesters, because this is what our democracy looks like. Let's not think about this as these people are burning folks here, these people are throwing rocks here. That entire picture that you're looking at, Amy, that you're involved in, that is the state, the representation of the state of our democracy for black folks in America. It is messy, it can be ugly, it's full of passion, but people should not turn away from it. People should not try to tamp it down and control it. People should begin to understand if that's what we're dealing with, if that's where we are as a society, we need to think about structural changes in order to make to change the status quo.